Good morning and welcome to this webinar about really outsourcing and whether outsourcing fills you with fear. And really what we're going to be doing in the next 45 minutes to an hour with Alan Woods and Fraser, who's currently having connectivity issues, the wonders of modern technology, is just trying really to discuss these myths and these fears and really kind of put your minds at ease to the benefits of outsourcing and what they could really do for your firm, and could even, turbocharge growth and just give you a lot of flexibility to maybe deal with the current economic situation and circumstances that we're all facing at the moment, and with inflation, tax increases for employees and employers, gas bills. Outsourcing is a real viable option that can help your firm in maybe difficult times. So I'm just going to give it another minute or two just to see if Fraser can get in. If not, I'm sure I can crack on in his stead. But we're joined with Alan Woods, Director at Woods Squares Limited. Good morning, Alan. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Nick. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm good. I'm better if technology was working, but such is life. Such is life. So what we're going to do firstly in the background is I'm just going to run a quick poll. Okay, I just want to understand what your perceptions are of outsourcing, because I feel like in the accountancy space, you get a right spectrum of opinions on it. Some love it, some are unsure about it, and some would never touch it with a barge pole. So that poll should be popping up on your screen now. So please do click on it and let us know. So the question is, what's your perception of outsourcing? Is it negative, neutral, positive, or very positive? Please do engage with that. We've got some questions. The initial poll responses is suggesting the polarization that I was hinting at. So I think this is going to be, a very interesting webinar. So what I'm going to do in the meantime is I'm going to load up my screen. Oh, we've got Fraser. Good morning, Fraser. How are you? You okay? Oh, I think he's paused again. So what I'll do is I'm going to start sharing my screen, and we'll get the webinar PowerPoints up and running. Okay, so that's up and running. And let's just go before. Let me stop sharing. Okay. All right. So the results of the poll are 20% of you have quite a negative perception of outsourcing. Majority of you have quite a neutral opinion of it. So, not fussed or not really too worried about it. 20% have positive, and only one of you, it's very positive. So I think we've got a lot of work to do here to try and really...
I can't get on. I can't see anything. I can't hear anything.
Get across the benefits of outsourcing and not the benefits of an internet connection. So just to get started, I think what I would love to do really is just, we've already said hello to Alan, but Alan, can you give us your experiences of outsourcing and, your kind of story to how...
Yeah, I can't hear what they're saying.
And how you got to that kind of position, really.
Yeah, no problem at all. So as Nick said, Alan Woods from Woods Squared. We're accountants based up in the northwest, just by Liverpool. So particularly happy at the moment as a Liverpool supporter as well. So I won't dwell on that too much, I'll be honest. But yeah, we are a firm of there's two of us, me and my wife Tracy, and probably from the beginning, well, during COVID actually is when we really started doing outsourcing. It's something we had looked at before. with good and bad experiences, if I'm honest, when we tried it before. And that was probably because we kind of just tried to abdicate almost, as opposed to sort of trying to work with the outsourcing partner. So we just sort of gave them something and hoped it was going to come back in the right format. We've been outsourcing with Initor for a couple, probably about 18 months now. And it's worked really well because we spent the time, or they spent the time with us initially to understand what it was that we wanted, what sort of services we needed, what systems we might have used, what software we were using. Obviously, Capium we use as our compliance software, and they were okay to use that as well. So that really helped to actually, the fact that we've got the technology in place, everything we already do is sort of cloud-based anyway. That's probably made it that little bit easier to be able to sort of start sharing information and getting them to work on files and work for us. And yeah, it's a great resource that we can kind of turn on and off as we need to, really, whenever we've got sort of particularly busy periods.
Brilliant, Alan. And what situation did you find yourselves in that made you really consider outsourcing as an option? What led you to that kind of decision-making process? If you could give a bit of insight, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, for us, it was probably due to just down to workload, I suppose, just particularly during that COVID period when there was quite a lot of pressure, I suppose, to some extent, of things like furlough claims, grants, loans that the businesses were trying to go for, and just generally trying to provide that level of support to business owners, just reassurance as much as anything else, and being there for dealing with those sort of really important questions, but actually probably not questions to do with anything that we usually would deal with. Nothing to do with accounts and tax. People weren't really interested in that too much at that time. They're really just more interested in, what does the latest announcement from the Prime Minister mean? How do they get access or have their hands on the funding and the support that the Chancellor's just announced? So that's really where we were spending a lot of our time. And then by kind of default, then I suppose some of the more sort of statutory obligations, compliance accounts, tax returns, they were things that obviously still needed to be done to make sure that the clients got things done on time. But our time was more relevant and more important to be spent actually speaking to clients and supporting them through that really sort of uncertain, difficult period, particularly in that first sort of 6 to 12 months, I think. So we were able then to have that resource to fall back on with Initor, to be able to let them to deal with things like year-end accounts, year-end tax returns for clients, knowing that was being dealt with, that then we could then spend our time, as I say, doing what we felt at the time was the really important stuff, speaking to the clients and keeping them sort of reassured, and trying to keep them as positive and confident and upbeat as we could, given the sort of daily changes at the initial offset.
Yeah, I think that was a full-time job for everybody, to be honest. So, like, how did you get started? Did you kind of initially drip feed some work? Did it start off with bookkeeping activities, and did it expand, or how did you kind of dip your toes into that?
Yeah, no, we probably did it. We did it the way, actually. I think maybe most firms might do this. Again, I don't want to sort of say there's a right way or a wrong way. It does work, different things for different firms, I suppose. But we started with the compliance services. So we started with annual accounts for limited companies, where we started with the ones actually where we'd done the bookkeeping. So in essence, it was more a case of kind of finishing off the file, if you like, doing the disclosures, doing the formalities almost, of putting them that information into Capium and generating the stat accounts and stat corporation tax returns. So that really gave us an opportunity to test the process, I suppose, with something that was relatively straightforward, because we were confident the starting point was correct because we'd done the information ourselves. As we then developed the process with Initor, we then started to just send them year-end compliance records that were still computerized but had been prepared by the client. So again, there was maybe a bit more adjustments, a few more journals that needed to be made, a bit more information we might have needed to provide to them in terms of what we would normally do with certain transactions or certain things within that particular business. But by doing that, I'd say just over time, we were able to then send them a job or a couple of jobs, and then know that within a certain period of time, those jobs will be back to us to be able to do a sort of final check, a final review, and ultimately get them out to the client.
So can can I pose quite a direct question, really?
Yeah.
I think there might be, a lot of accountants on this call who may be in the same position. So they've got additional work or they want to free up their time. Why outsourcing? And why not hiring a UK employee or, building your team out in Liverpool?
Yeah, no, that's definitely one of them. I think like when we speak to a lot of accountants, and there is that kind of split definitely where people want to build a team, want to build employees, want to be able to have people that they can feel like they've got a bit more control over what they do or don't do because they've got, they're there in the office with them. From our point of view, I think what we found is that the flexibility and the ability to be able to say, well, actually this month we've got 7 jobs that we need to outsource, whereas actually maybe next month that might only be 2 or 3, or maybe it might be 15. Mm-hmm. So actually the ability to be able to kind of do that was the real plus point for us. Obviously with an employee, you've got to obviously have a set, consistent volume of work to be able to keep them fully occupied for the whole period. Whereas, as I say, from our point of view, we didn't feel like we had that kind of flow of work to be able to say, yeah, we've definitely got a full-time position or a full-time part-time position for somebody to be able to do that for us. With COVID as well, we moved from an office-based environment to working from home. So again, there was that element of actually, managing a remote workforce, which it would have been at that point if we'd had UK-based employees. In essence, is no real difference than managing a person that happens to be in India or Pakistan or South Africa or whatever the particular provider is that you're working with.
Philippines is another country as
well.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So having people in those places, I think COVID's probably taught us more than any other time that actually, we can do that. Technology this morning hasn't perhaps been a great example of that. In theory, with COVID, I think it's opened everyone's eyes up to the fact that people can work from anywhere, and it's not about them being in the office and being in a sat next to you in a desk. There is benefits to that if you're training someone and you need to sort of give them some sort of mentorship or support. That's crucial. But I think from a technical aspect, whether that be accounts or whether it be outsourcing marketing or outsourcing answering your phone or outsourcing some other admin tasks, there's a huge opportunity for businesses in general to do that, and definitely for accountants to do that more.
Yeah, no, and I think just to echo some of the points you made, prior to the pandemic, we had pretty much a full-time resource who was doing business development for us. And then when the pandemic hit, we took a decision that we didn't think accountants wanted to be contacted at all, really about thinking about software, because we, similar to accountants, were digesting the twists and turns and everything that was coming out of the Chancellor. And so we had to make a tough decision. This was a person who had made, we had a long relationship with them, and, for business, to ensure that, we could continue to service our clients, we had to unfortunately let them go. Now that we're in a position where we want to kind of pick that up again, we're thinking of outsourcing business development. And the main reasons we've decided upon that is just risk. For us, we're all at Capium, we're all fully remote. And we were like, if you wanted to do that specific role, you have to be really highly motivated, and doing it by yourself, it could be really quite tough. And not only do you have to hire a person, you've got to train a person, you've got to ensure that that person buys into your culture. And even then, after a couple of months, you might have spent a few £1,000s on recruitment fees and training costs. That individual could say, actually, for a number of reasons, it doesn't work for us. And whilst we're kind of, dipping our toes into business development and seeing what the outputs and outcomes for us would be, we've taken the approach that, as a company, gives, the most risk-free approach. And pending if there's a stronger business case for it, then we can maybe think about, bringing that individual in-house. But that's just kind of some of our thought processes. So we've got one quick question that's flown in straight away. Is from Ron. And I think you may have addressed this already, Alan, but there's no harm in saying it again. What services do you outsource? I think the company that you use is Initor, and how much does it cost? Yeah, if you want to give maybe indicative costs,
Okay.
that could be a good idea.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, so in terms of the services that we currently outsource, we are doing the year-end services, so compliance for annual accounts, annual tax returns. We haven't yet outsourced bookkeeping because we tend to kind of take care of that in-house at the moment, or with clients, and then effectively just review what they've done. But that would probably be the next thing that we would look to outsource, is that bookkeeping element of it. I know a number of accountants, that's one of the things they get a huge advantage from outsourcing, where they've got a large number of bookkeeping clients, because ultimately, because of the time differences, which can actually be quite advantageous, you can wake up in the morning, get into the office, and actually all the bookkeeping for clients has been done really well, and it's up to date and ready to be checked or sent back to the client. Obviously, you can do self-assessment tax returns, you can do payroll, VAT, all that sorts of things is what Initor or outsourcing providers can help with. From our point of view, in terms of the cost point of that, when we spoke to Initor, which is again probably about 18 months ago, maybe different now, but we've got an arrangement with them which is kind of I suppose more like a pay-as-you-go kind of approach with them. So we're actually, I suppose, paying the highest rate in effect per hour. And when I say that, it's probably still only about £15 an hour or so on average. But that gives us the ultimate flexibility that if in 1 month we haven't got anything to outsource, we're not sort of tied into having to send 20 hours, 50 hours, 100 hours to them. If you can make that commitment, if you have got that volume of work, you'll get a much better rate, I think, and also you can also get an assigned person, I think, within a tour as well, if you've got a volume of work. So then you've got a real consistency in the service levels and the kind of the work that you get back and forward. And obviously, as you work with that person, that should get even better and better as that progresses.
So, and I think the good point you just made is the ability to turn a resource on and off, and having control of that costs. Similar to us in our business development, we might want to switch it off at short notice, and outsourcing gives us that flexibility. Whereas, as you said, a few minutes earlier, that if you had a UK team member, you'd have to guarantee workflow, for them, and to kind of ensure that they're kept busy. Otherwise, you've got a resource who's just sitting on their hands, really, and that costs you money.
So one thing on that as well, Nick, I'll just add on there. I mean, I just sort of alluded to it then in terms of consistency, but I think the one thing that we found with employing team members, because we have in the past, we've had team members, so we have employed UK-based people, and we don't now. It's just, as I say, just me and my wife, and we use an outsourced solution. And one of the challenges which we'd found, and maybe a lot of other accountants maybe face this as well, is that when you employ someone, the desire from us and for them is for them to progress and for them to develop and move on to other things. And what that ultimately means is that, unless you're growing at a huge rate, there's going to be a point where actually, you haven't got something more interesting or more exciting for that person to do at that point in time. And that can cause issues, or that can cause potential challenges in itself. Whereas with outsourcing, that if you've got bookkeeping to do, you've got a resource there that is able, confident, and happy to do bookkeeping, and that's kind of what they specialize in. So I think that is really key as well, that you don't maybe have to think about kind of the dynamics and that side of it. You've always got a reliable, consistent delivery of the services that you've got to provide to clients.
And I suppose won't ever be dissatisfied if their role doesn't change. I think that's a very fair point as well, because if you are building out a team, you've got to think about company culture, you've got to think about training, all these kind of extra pressures that if you're like you and your partner are running your firm, that's just a lot of extra work or stress that you don't really need to worry about, really. Brilliant. I think that's a great point. So what I would like to do is just post our second poll at the moment. I hope it's appeared on your screen. just to make, because tech is not filling me with confidence this morning. So this question is, what are your most common fears when you think about outsourcing? Is it costs? Is it data protection and security? Is it confidentiality? And is it quality control? So please, put this in, because I think it'd be really interesting to hear what our attendees are thinking about this. As I stress, please keep on firing questions away, for Alan and myself to kind of try our best to answer and share some insight on this topic. I do hope Fraser may be able to join us at some point, but I am aware that he's been facing difficulties from when he first started to join us. So I will be trying my best to present on Initor's behalf. Thankfully, we did a few run-throughs, so I can remember what needs to be said. Let's see, there's a question. Rom, I think Initor will send you some emails and contact you afterwards, but I believe it's spelt slightly differently, like that. Okay, buddy. All right, so the results of the poll are in. Okay, so it seems that there's quite a the fears are spread mainly across two aspects, really. It's data protection and security. We all know how big of a change GDPR was, and all the changes to processes that caused. Just now we've had a late surge for quality control. So that's just tipped the balance. So it seems, the main concerns or fears is GDPR and quality control. So I think before we go on to the presentation, going to quickly touch upon quality control. Alan, how do you kind of, double check or ensure that the work that's been done by Initor / any outsourcing partner is fit for your customers?
Yeah, I mean, we still have, when it comes back to us, we have the same kind of review process as we would have if a member in the UK had done it, really, in terms of a UK team member. The benefit, I suppose, with using Initor is that they already have a review process in place. So although the work may be done by a individual within their organisation, before it comes back to us to even see it, it's gone through a review process and a quality control process from their side. Before we started the process, we got sent through a sample accounts file that they would be using. They're flexible to kind of adapt that to something if you have your own as well. So it's not necessarily that they have to use theirs. But the sample they sent through to us was, it put ours to shame, to be fair. So we just decided, let's just go with that one then. So there's a lot more work that they do in addition to things like analytical review, notes to partner, identifying where there's particular variances that they identify in that file that would come back to us, so that when we're reviewing it, we've already got the main points that we can then communicate to the client as and when we feed that back to them. Whereas previously, when we've had that done in the past from team members, that hasn't always been the case. It's more a case of you might get the file correct, but not necessarily identifying those key points or those particular issues that you might want to do for for a particular client. So yeah, quality control for us, I think you almost need to treat the outsourcer as just another person and review their work in a similar way that you would do before it actually leaves the office, that you would for any other individual. Slightly different, I suppose, with some services like bookkeeping, maybe even payroll, because there's a sort of more time sensitive element to that. So again, you might just want to maybe test them a few times and do a few samples before you actually go live with the individuals that you might work with, just to make sure that they understand the process that you use and the process that your clients might use as well.
So in essence, don't really treat them any differently as if you had an understudy working for you. As much as you would check their work and build up that confidence in their output and in that relationship, then you can maybe step back a little bit and let it run for itself.
Yeah,
I think that's really, really insightful. Okay, I'm going to try and share my screen. Let me know if you can see a window, a Chrome tab. Let me see if you can see this. Can we see that Can we see that?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Oh, yeah, can I?
Okay, let's view. And is it in a slideshow?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've just done that poll. And as we've kind of discussed that the most common concern is quality control. Okay. So we're going to start with costs. I think just to highlight that most of the costs that exist with an outsourcing company, you're mainly really paying for just the resource. In-house, Initor or other outsourcing companies would look after the HR, the laptops, the availability of this resource as well. So these are kind of stresses that you wouldn't have to worry yourself about having if you had that staff to look after yourself. All you're really paying for, as Alan said, is that service. In which you can kind of rapidly upscale it or downgrade it as time goes on. And so I think some of the fears are, the costs can be tricky and hard to work out what the rates are. You might feel like you're going to get charged a wide spectrum of prices that could be a surprise to you. And that, finally, that the biggest issue is how quickly can you go to live? So, Alan,
Yeah.
Could you give me a bit of insight really here about how, when in your journey, did you, as you said, you had particular services, but were prices transparent? Could you, scale it up, scale it down, quite quickly? Did you have to give notice? And maybe from your initial conversation, how quickly did it take to go live?
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. I mean, from our point of view, the clarity was brilliant in terms of what the cost would be. So again, as I said, we were on a kind of the pay-as-you-go model. So we're on the slightly, if you like, the more expensive version of it, but the flexibility works really well for us. So actually, it's definitely cheaper than other options would be within Initor for us at this point. The range for that ranges from £8 to £18. So just to give people a flavour for that. So the more you can commit to in terms of the cost or the number of hours or the certain mix of services, then obviously the better the potential package and cost can be. But again, within that contract, which is what we've got within Initor when we signed up, that clearly says what the rate is that we'd be charged, what that's based on, when the charges would be incurred, etc. The other thing as well with that, which is really good, is that when we send the job over to Initor, we give them the budget. So we say to them, this job that we think should take 5 hours or 6 hours, 8 hours, whatever it might well be. And at the outset, they then have to either agree with that or say, no, actually, we've looked through it. We think it's going to take longer. So again, even from the start, you know exactly how many hours are going to be taken. So you can, based on the rate that you've got agreed, you know exactly what that cost is going to be for that particular piece of work, which again, it gives you real clarity on that. In terms of the time to go live, I think for us, it was probably a matter of a few days, really. It was more about availability of trying to get those initial conversations with Fraser and the team at Initor so that we could understand exactly what their process was and what our process was. Once we were up and running, we were effectively sending the jobs the following day. And as I say, from our contract, the one that we're under, it's a turnaround time, a guaranteed turnaround time at the worst, if you like, of 7 days. And again, if we've got something of an urgent nature, we can let them know and they'll prioritize that and do that on a much quicker turnaround if necessary. But yeah, the being up and running was phenomenal, really. And if you compare that to recruiting someone, in the UK, it's going to take probably a month even to get the advert out and try and filter some applications, maybe another month to do interviews, and then up to 3 months notice period if you do find someone that you want to hire. So even if you use outsourcing as a way of sort of plugging those gaps as you are recruiting, I think otherwise, you end up recruiting someone and there's a backlog of work for them to do straight away. Whereas with using outsourcing alongside a recruitment model, it really takes the pressure off just hiring the wrong person because you need someone, which can often be the case.
I think, to use a phrase by an infamous politician, an oven-ready resource.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good point that you made, is that, if you suddenly had a large client or a number of clients joined your practice, you can scale up relatively quickly. And it sounds from your experience, Alan, that you were able to do that, in a matter of days, if not a week.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think one of our most voted fears was data protection and security, about the data integrity and the misuse of data. Thankfully, for the briefing that I had with Fraser earlier, Initor Global are fully GDPR compliant. Okay, even though they're not based in the UK, they follow all the rules and regulations that you as your practice would expect to face as well. Okay, and all of their staff members have undergone the relevant GDPR training, and I'm pretty certain that other outsourcing companies, if they're offering services into the UK, they would be similar. Okay, from my perception, GDPR now has been bedded into our daily lives for about 3 or 4 years. So I would like to think now that most companies and practices have that GDPR process under lock and key. Alan, did you have any GDPR concerns or data concerns, and how were they addressed?
We didn't ultimately, because the data doesn't technically leave our facilities, whether that be via a shared Dropbox folder that we may have set up, or a shared using Capium, because obviously that they've just been able to add them as a user in effect, and they can just view the client and the service that they need. So again, that was really a helpful feature within Capium from a security point of view, that they don't get access to everything, because I know other software providers, you can't restrict user access. It's like all or nothing. Whereas Capium was fantastic from that point of view, and other things as well, not just for that, but for that one in particular around this aspect. And again, if they're using Zero or HubDoc or those sorts of things, again, because all the data is effectively already in the cloud, they're not moving where the data is. They're just keying data into the right places. So the fact that they've got the GDPR compliance and they've got those tight controls already was sort of reassurance for us as well, that there was minimal risk of any data problems, or no greater risk of data problems than there would have been from an employee losing a laptop on a train type of thing. So it's I think it's even potentially more secure using it via an outsourcer, but definitely make sure that they've got the same sort of GDPR compliance and security compliance within their sort of IT infrastructure, really.
So, the risk of maybe using an outsourced employee is probably the same risk as having a UK-based employee who's working from home.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, brilliant. Let's move on. Confidentiality, speaking to clients. I think, some of the fears that when speaking to other accountants over the past few years is that they think for some reason, or that the outsourcing resources would speak directly to customers, or this outsourcing firm would take the accountant's client. I think that's really the second point is really a myth. In Initor and other outsourcing companies would not have a reputation or have ability to service any clients, I think, if they went behind accountants' backs and pinched clients. And I think also that would eventually become exposed. And I think people would make a big song and dance about it. And as we all know in the accounting industry, news spreads fast. So if any outsourcing firm did do any of that, I think they'll quickly be, blacklisted. And I think, the first point about talking directly to customers, I think that really depends on how you want to use outsourcing, really. I think what's really gained in popularity in the last couple of years is firms to take your inbound calls, to be almost like your virtual receptionist. So you can, depending on what kind of relationship you want, have that. But Alan, I think as you've explained quite clearly, is that they're kind of behind the scenes doing legwork that frees you up to maybe speak to customers be client facing, and build those key relationships.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the way I sort of see outsourcing working, or ultimately at its sort of optimal. Really, is that the outsourcing should be there to free up the major fee earners, whether that be the partners or the the client managers, to be able to speak directly, manage those relationships, as you said, Nick. Develop opportunities within that client base to maybe provide additional services to those clients as well. Probably the one thing that I'd say in terms of directly speaking to customers, just so as it doesn't sort of become a kind of a to me to you kind of thing for email chains or Slack conversations, if you've got an outsourced solution, is maybe around payroll and perhaps around bookkeeping, just because you might want to check them initially again, just to get confidence that how they're maybe presenting those questions or what they're asking is the way you would like it to be asked. But in terms of the speed of the turnaround on those two services, I think the ability for the outsourced partner to raise questions, whether it's through maybe a chat function within your website, or whether it's within a portal environment that you've got, or within a shared email resource that you might have, I think that can be really useful. But I think in terms of adding value to things like year-end accounts and tax returns, the outsourcers can definitely produce all the reports and all the information, whether you might use whatever the hundreds of apps that there are connected to all these pieces of software that you might have to generate the reports. And then, as I say, it allows you the time to actually interpret that and then effectively communicate the value of that and what the business owner needs to do.
So I think a really good question has come from Marion, is if you do outsource bookkeeping or any service, have you, Alan, informed your clients, or for as far as they're aware, they're working with Wood Squares Limited?
Yeah. That's how we've dealt with it. To be honest, we've just dealt with it as a. We haven't specifically mentioned it. We wouldn't not mention it if we were asked. I was at a new client meeting yesterday actually, and I spoke to him and I explained our setup as a business. Well, Nick's just vanished. That's a good trick.
Sorry, my post came through the door. And
Okay.
as I'm an accountant who's been on webinars with me before, he loves to bark and interrupt webinars. So I was just giving him a good old shush. But sorry, Alan.
Oh, that's all right. No. So as I was at a meeting yesterday with a new client, and I just described our setup as a business. I say to them, well, our business is set up. There's me and Tracy, my wife, and then we use outsourcers and subcontractors to help with the workload during different periods during the year. So I don't necessarily specifically say such and such is doing this task for a particular client, but every business that we deal with knows that we use subcontractors and or outsourcing to be able to deliver the services that we do deliver to them.
Brilliant. I hope that clears that up. Okay. And carrying on with the presentation, quality control. Again, I think this was the most highly voted kind of fear. So work not up to standards, not having the personal touch, and not having control. I think, Alan, you mentioned that you were actually surprised about the quality of some of the work that was given, and I suppose accountants, for accountants, what your end clients see at the end of the day is the accounts, the tax return. So I think it's really important that they match the firm standards and they look good. How's your experience been in that, Alan?
Yeah, no, as I say, for us, it's been great. The standard file that they sent across for the accounts was brilliant. There was the element of kind of control features, if you like, already built into that as a standard working papers file was brilliant. I think in terms of the not having the personal touch, and that's one of the points on the slide. I think for me, the key thing for us that we've learned and we continue to kind of learn going forwards is the more information you can provide to the outsource partner when you give them the piece of work about that client, the better. I'm sure we've all got clients that are a little bit unique in the way that they might either like information to be presented, or how they like to maybe things to be categorized in certain areas. Even though the common sense says it should be somewhere, they like it to be somewhere else. That those sorts of things, if you know that's what the preference is for that client, obviously you do know that someone else doing it the same as an employee wouldn't necessarily know that in the first instance. You've just got to tell them that, just pass that information on. And once you've done it once, if they do this work repeatedly, they'll build up that kind of knowledge themselves. But ultimately, initially, it's just part of that initial kind of handover, sort of perm file sort of scenario, really, just to give a little bit of background.
Brilliant. Okay, so maybe it's time to start thinking more like your customers. The benefits of outsourcing, as we've discussed. I'm just going to rattle through with this. The next few slides so we can have a bit of a Q&A at the end. So whilst I'm doing this, attendees, please feel free to fire away questions. Okay. The benefits of outsourcing, I suppose, not just for accountancy services, but generically, is that they reduce operational costs, overheads, HR costs. It frees up time for accountants to spend with customers and do more lucrative work like advisory services, which I know, Alan, you've stressed previously on different webinars. I think with MTD, ITSA changes on the horizon. There is going to be a lot of extra legwork that's going to be needed to be done, especially with the need now for essentially all transactions to be kept on digital records, and then the reconciliation that has to take place after that. You can increase your capacity, but on the opposite of that, you can decrease the capacity very at short notice, and you can rapidly expand your practice without all the costs associated with that. Again, you can meet staff shortages. You can scale your team to meet production needs. You can expand your service portfolio. For instance, you could use an outsourcing company or Initor to do company secretarial services. It might not be something that you yourself is an expert in, but Initor and other companies might have a wide spectrum of additional services that you can actually offer out to your clients, increase that revenue per client. And again, that just leads into the increasing profitability. Cat's got my tongue. So I think some essential takeaways is that before work starts, NDAs are signed. So that gives you a bit of confidence that your data is not going to get misused, missold, or your clients kind of contacted behind your back. As Alan said as well, that I think there'll be working papers so that they can demonstrate the calculations and how they ended up with their kind of end results. I think something that we haven't actually touched upon is that there might be a misconception that they would not work UK hours or UK when there's bank holidays and situations like that. Initor follows, standard UK holiday times. So the team itself are full of experienced and fully qualified accountants. One of the softwares that they use is Capium, but it's not limited to Capium. I believe they use Iris, Sage, QuickBooks, Xero, all mainstream accountancy softwares. Okay. And the work, as we're talking about that quality control aspect, the work is reviewed twice by the accountant in-house and the account manager. And I suppose that third check, whilst you're kind of maybe establishing and building that relationship, would be done by yourself. Now we're on to the Q&A part of this webinar. Alan, anything you want to add to those kind of benefits, or any ones that we missed out that your company has felt?
Yeah, I think probably just the main one I'd say at the minute is the staff shortages, recruitment. At the moment, from what I've heard from other accountants, or certainly generally probably anywhere, is recruitment is really, really difficult at the moment to try and find good people. And that's sort of because, even if you do find someone, I've also heard that they go back to their employer and they say, well, I can't afford to lose you, how much to keep you, type of thing. So that can be really, really challenging to find the right people. So I think that outsourcing, as I mentioned earlier, I think is a real good complement to that, even if it is just there as a means to maintain that kind of consistency of service and not getting behind or causing a backlog whilst you are looking to recruit or employ people. And it might be that actually once you try outsourcing, you might then maybe change that approach anyway, and look to do that more and more. I think the other thing I'd add as well is that I know you mentioned yourself, Nick, with your business. You're not an accountancy business, although your customers are accountants and you use outsourcing. Probably the vast majority of every one of our clients will use outsourcing in one way, shape, or other, whether it's someone helping doing marketing for like social media or the website, or like you say, answering the phone or using a virtual address. So when you think about it, actually all we're doing as a business is just doing exactly what all of our clients either are doing or perhaps should be doing if they're not. So it gives you a real good conversation starter. If they're not doing it themselves and you start to do it and see some great results, you could start to maybe make that point to your clients, and definitely make the point to them, well, what about if you outsourced all of your accounts function to us, because now we've got this resource that we can use and we can deliver on. That might be another great way to build your business, grow your practice, and actually help a lot of our business clients at the moment.
No, I think just to add to that, Alan, I think to run a successful business, it requires a wide range of special skill sets, and they might not be all that you necessarily possess. So, at Capium, we outsource some of our digital marketing. So, our Google Ads, PPC, we've got a resource who looks after that, and I'm just trying to think. And if you also think about it, all your kind of working relationships in which someone provides a service to you, it's essentially outsourced. You're not taking on every kind of aspect of your business on a day-to-day running. By extension, the client is outsourcing their accountant work to you. You're being their in-house kind of finance director. I agree, Alan. Unless we've comprehensively addressed every question that has popped up, I will leave it for a couple more minutes just to see if any other questions do kind of pop up. But yeah, just to stress, again, that outsourcing is really a good way to help you scale up your business, a cost-effective solution as well. Provide additional services like payroll, company secretarial, and you can go live with this all relatively quickly. Okay, there hasn't been any more questions, so all this leads me to do is say thank you very much, Alan. I really appreciate your time. Fraser sends his apologies. All it means is that we've just got to do another session in the future, so no worries there. But yeah, my name's Nick. I work at Capium. Please feel free to reach out to me directly. Oh wait, I think there's another slide. Feel free to reach out to me directly on my email address there. If you want to speak to Initor about any outsourcing services or what they could do for your practice, be it bespoke services or more traditional, please reach out to Fraser. And if you'd like to discuss with Alan a bit more about his experiences about outsourcing, please contact him with that email address as well. Okay, you can always connect with us on LinkedIn and give us a message, and we can happily share more info. And finally, just to make you all aware that Capium offers 25% discount to Initor customers. They want to use our product, take advantage of that cloud solution. No user license cap. And Initor also offers a 10% discount to Capium customers. So some perks there. Okay. Thank you all so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. Fraser again sending his apologies. Cheers, Alan. I'll see you at Account.
Yeah, see you next week.
But yeah, take care, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.